I'd like to begin. Javier Becerra, Attorney General for the State of California. I'm going to begin by introducing first the folks who will speak today, and I want to make sure I recognize my team who worked on these matters. And so I'm going to go a little longer than I typically would in any press conference because I want to get into the heart of what we want to discuss. After I speak, I'm going to invite the Chief of the Sacramento Police Department, Daniel Hahn, to say some words. After he speaks, we will then invite our Mayor of Sacramento, Darrell Steinberg, to say some remarks. And then after he speaks, we'd like to invite Pastor Sadler from the Shiloh Baptist Church to say some words. So Pastor Anthony Sadler will speak at the end. At that conclusion of his remarks, we will take questions from the press. And I'd ask the press to, if you have questions that are unrelated to today's subject, that you refrain until we answer any and all questions that might be posed regarding this subject. Okay? Let me introduce some of my team. Not all are here. I'm going to run down some names because there are a few of them. Sue Slager, who is the Supervising Deputy Attorney General, who is here. Ronald Lee, Deputy Attorney General. Cherokee Melton, Deputy Attorney General. Randy Chance, the Director of our Research Bureau within the Criminal Justice Information Services. Janie Scott, who is a research program specialist. Lillian Marr, who is a legal analyst. John Marsh, who is the Assistant Chief of the Division of Law Enforcement, is here. Chief Gardner, Kevin Gardner, is here as well, although he was recused from this particular activity because he's a former member of the Sacramento Police Department as well. And I want to acknowledge Kelly Evans, who served as the Special Assistant for Criminal Justice Issues in the department before Governor Newsom stole her from us and now has her with him. I also want to acknowledge the team that, quite honestly, made it possible for us to get here. Ron Davis, who is here, who is a partner with 21st Century Policing and is perhaps the most or one of the most experienced technicians as a former law enforcement individual, someone who has worked in government, federal and otherwise, a real expert on this that we really leaned on for a great deal of information and advice. Stephen Raphael, who's a professor at UC Berkeley at the Goldman School of Public Policy, who provided immense support when it came to data and research on this subject matter. On March 27th, 2018, following the March 18th policing incident which resulted in the fatal shooting of Stephon Clark by members of the Sacramento Police Department, I announced that the California Department of Justice would undertake independent oversight of the Sacramento Police Department's investigation of the shooting. I took this step at the request of the Chief of Police of Sacramento, Daniel Hahn. Concurrent with that decision, Chief Hahn and I agreed that the Department of Justice would also conduct an independent assessment of the Sacramento Police Department's use of force-related policies, training, and practices. The purpose of this review was to help identify best practices to achieve the safest outcomes for community members and officers alike. We are here today to announce the first set of results of this independent assessment. Our purpose today is not to discuss the criminal investigation of the shooting of Stephon Clark. That investigation is entirely separate and ongoing, and as such, not appropriate for discussion at this time. You may have also noticed that I said we are announcing the first set of results of our assessment. Today's report addresses six specific areas: use of force priorities, use of force reporting and investigation, use of force training, past officer-involved shooting incidents, personnel complaint procedures, community engagement, and transparency. Our assessment of SPD, the Sacramento Police Department's use of force-related policies and systems, will continue beyond today's report. The second and final phase of our assessment of the SPD, which is already underway, will cover the following areas: a sample of non-deadly use of force incidents, a sample of misconduct complaints, the discipline system, prevention of bias, recruitment and hiring, data management. We will report the results of these additional assessments once our work is completed. The Sacramento Police Department is not alone among communities trying to identify how to best ensure that policing is safe, effective, and constitutional. But Sacramento's leaders should be recognized for reaching out and voluntarily requesting assistance in this critical matter. Chief Hahn, you invited me and the Department of Justice to come in. You invited outside scrutiny of your operations. That is a hallmark of strong leadership. It sends an important signal about you and your department's commitment to continued progress. Beginning in April 2018, my team engaged in countless interviews, site visits, ride-alongs. We toured training facilities, observed training programs, and reviewed thousands of pages of documents. This process enabled my team to better understand both SPD policy, in other words, the rules that govern conduct, and SPD practices, how those rules are or are not reflected in action. We were able to observe how SPD systems are currently functioning, both in terms of positive practices and areas for improvement. I thank the men and women of SPD, from the rank and file all the way to the top, for their exceptional openness and cooperation. Equally important, we sought out the voices and perspectives of the community. We met with stakeholders from different neighborhoods and sectors of the diverse Sacramento community, including community-based organizations, residents, and advocates. We thank these civic leaders for their heartfelt candor and for sharing their experiences and insights with us. In conducting this assessment, our DOJ team was assisted by nationally recognized law enforcement leaders and experts with deep experience in the issues evaluated. I mentioned their names. It goes without saying that we could not have produced this thorough of an assessment without their partnership. Each section of our report highlights areas where SPD excels and or otherwise engages in promising practices. We then identify areas for improvement in each of these areas assessed. Finally, we offer recommendations grounded in evidence and promising practices from around the country to help guide the reform efforts which SPD has independently committed to pursue. Some of the key findings, and I won't go through them all, but some of the key findings, because they were a number. Overall, our DOJ team found SPD personnel to be professional, thoughtful, and committed to change. Throughout the process, personnel at all levels of the police department have been receptive to evaluation and improvement. At the outset of our review, we discovered that SPD's command and supervisory staff had already begun thinking strategically about how to improve systems internally and build external relationships. And SPD has taken significant steps in this direction already. The department recently implemented a foot pursuit policy. It strengthened its body-worn camera policy. It engaged in enhanced transparency efforts, such as the timely public release of use of force statistics and audio and video recordings in officer-involved shootings and other critical incidents. At the same time, we also observed that the SPD had room for improvement in some of the operational systems that we assessed. We identified room for improvement in outdated use of force policies. We found a lack of standardization and rigor in use of force internal investigations and training. And we found a lack of suitable measures to handle systemic information collection and accountability, particularly with regard to the personnel complaint process. In all, our report issued a series of recommendations, 49 in all, intended to assist SPD in managing use of force and in protecting community members and officers. Let me highlight just a few of the recommendations. For one, SPD could put policies and procedures in place to make sure that use of force incidents are reviewed and investigated appropriately by the agency. SPD could also modify their use of force training to place greater emphasis on teaching officers to have a guardian mindset, meaning that officers emphasize communication over commands and cooperation over compliance. SPD could also build a system to track intake and internal review of complaints by the public about the conduct of their personnel to ensure that they are properly investigated. Overall, I think it's important to first begin by saying that losing a loved one under any circumstances leads to pain and soul search. The officer-involved shooting of Stephon Clark has become an indelible event here in California, not only for the Clark family and the involved officers, but for the entire community of Greater Sacramento. The Sacramento Police Department's willingness to analyze not only this incident, but also its own force-related policies and systems in an effort to attain safer outcomes in the future is most encouraging, as is the community's willingness to participate in this entire process. This partnership can help create a police culture that demonstrates that effective policing and respectful policing go hand in hand. Throughout this review, we observed reasonableness and good faith exhibited by all stakeholders, including community members, union officials, police personnel, and city leadership. That's what we want to encourage. That's what I'd like to encourage these stakeholders to continue working together. The Sacramento Police Department, our city leaders, our civic leaders, our residents working together to move forward. I want to thank those who were involved in helping us conduct this assessment. I'd now like to invite Chief Daniel Hahn to say some remarks.
Thank you. I'd first like to thank Attorney General Javier Becerra and his staff for agreeing to take on the responsibility of thoroughly examining our use of force-related policies, training, and practices to help identify possible ways to achieve safer outcomes for our community members and our officers alike. The Sacramento Police Department is not interested in being good enough or narrowly complying with the laws and policies governing our work. We continue to seek ways to be a leader in law enforcement and to set an example of transparency, community involvement, and constant improvement. That's why we invited the Attorney General to examine our department from top to bottom, to help us find ways to improve, even in ways no other agencies are doing today. Attorney General Becerra delivered on that request, and we are grateful to say that we have a robust list of recommendations we are taking to heart. We're going to keep our promise to examine every one of them with an open mind and an open organization. Today, we will provide a public list of each recommendation and our preliminary response to each one of them. Today's list of recommendations is only the first phase of what we know will be an ongoing cooperation with the Attorney General's office. Next, we understand, as the Attorney General mentioned earlier, his office will be looking into the use of force beyond officer-involved shootings and issues such as recruitment, hiring, and prevention of bias. We welcome this partnership and intend to uphold our end of it. After our initial review, there are numerous recommendations we believe we are substantially fulfilling today or where we have made significant progress towards implementing. Of course, we know there is always room to improve, and we will focus on improving even those areas where we already comply with the Attorney General's recommendations. The fact that no one has done it before or it's not real common in law enforcement will never prevent us from researching ways to continue to improve our department. In some cases, these recommendations reflect issues that face significant legal or legislative hurdles, but that law enforcement agencies statewide seek to explore further. Because we strive to be a department whose actions at all times reflect the best practices of our profession, we have begun moving toward the aspirations the Attorney General has for all of law enforcement in these areas. There are recommendations the Attorney General's staff has described as aspirational, things that a few, if any, departments are doing, but that a leader in law enforcement should strive to achieve. We recently created a research, development, and training division to do just that. As we strive to be aspirational, we know we can't do this without moving forward together as one community. Today, I'm pleased to have community leaders joining us who have been instrumental in helping us improve as a police department. Pastor Sadler, who you'll hear in a minute, from Shiloh Baptist Church, who speaks at our academy to our academy recruits and helped us create programs such as Walk in My Shoes, Day of Service, and developed a program for our recent academy graduates to join in the weekly Oak Park Peace Walk. Ramona Landeros, the president of the Benito Juarez Association, who has helped strengthen our relationship with the Spanish-speaking community through things such as Spanish-speaking town halls, and served on promotional panels within our department, and serves on our Use of Force Training Review Committee. Merv Brookins and Pastor P. from Brother to Brother, who continually work with officers through their Junior Pacers program and help coordinate the Del Paso Heights Day of Service, and were recognized as our 2018 Business Partner of the Year. We are grateful and eagerly accept the challenge of leading the discussion and the path forward on these issues, and we look forward to partnering with the Attorney General's office to make them a reality in our community. We are very grateful to the Attorney General for his partnership to achieve excellence. When we said we wanted a thorough, unrestricted examination of our department, we meant it. And when Attorney General Becerra promised to deliver it, he meant it. Now, the work before us, both agencies, begins in earnest. Thank you.
Thank you. Mayor Darrell Steinberg.
Thank you very much, Mr. Attorney General and Police Chief Hahn and all the leaders who are gathered here today. This is actually a remarkable document and does not happen every day. I want to begin by thanking the Attorney General, of course, for accepting Chief Hahn's invitation to examine how we police our community and recommend ways we can do better. The police chief asked him to give a thorough, unsparing examination, and he delivered exactly that. His report, as I have reviewed it, found that our policies are legally solid, praised our department, as you heard, for its professionalism, but also expressed specific ways that we can improve to not just live by the letter of the law, but actually to live up to the spirit, how best to protect our public safety officers and the community, and to reduce the potential of people being hurt or killed on either and both sides. What Attorney General Becerra has delivered is not a list of things we need to do to have a professional, effective police department. We are already that. It is instead a list that is intended for us to elevate, to ensure that our policies and our practices make us the leader in law enforcement. These recommendations, by the way, as I understand it, include things that many cities are not doing, and that many cities would tell you cannot be done. But that's not what the city of Sacramento is. We're not going to try to huddle in the middle of the pack. We are ready to lead the way to an era of policing where transparency, where fairness, and community partnership are central to everything we do. Chief Hahn, as the Attorney General said a moment ago, sought this review, deliberately sought this review, as a way to help get the Sacramento Police Department to achieve the standards of excellence in 21st century policing. He has earned my gratitude and deserves our community's gratitude for leaning in, not walking away or being defensive, which would be, I suppose, an easy thing to do. Acknowledging and admitting where we must improve our policies is a strength. It is not a weakness. Recognize that the Justice Department here praised the progress we have made in the past year. Every one of our officers, which is not true again in most cities, is equipped with a body camera. And our expectations for how they are used are being written into policy. Where there have been errors and problems and mistakes, they're being corrected. Our ordinance requiring a release of video footage has been adopted by the state legislature. And our city's practice of releasing video quickly far exceeds the new state law. Mr. Attorney General, you and your agency and your great team, because I know you have a great team, have done our police department, our city, and our community a major service here by helping to push the change that Chief Hahn and the City Council started. I would point out for myself that in my second week on the job, 2 years ago, I put forward the funding for $750,000 for de-escalation training. And it's now becoming the standard in our city and beyond. I'm very confident that Chief Hahn and the police department will embrace the findings of this examination and put them into action to ensure that we are a city where police and community work in partnership and where we lead the way to fairness and transparency. One other brief comment. I also believe that this very important independent review, and this is just my opinion, speaks to the policy direction I hope the state legislature will continue to try and take. Because just as the chief voluntarily asked the Attorney General to review our most high-profile officer-involved shooting in 2018, just as the Attorney General is providing this essential and helpful policy review, to the degree that the AG is able through the legislative process, and he, by the way, he is very able, to add more resources, the more independent the reviews in other incidents, the more faith people will have in whatever is the outcome. Finally, I look forward to working with the chief to bring these recommendations out into the community, as he has already begun, and we have already begun extensive community outreach to ensure that our neighborhoods are an integral part of these changes, to push each other to strive and to keep all people safe. And finally, I loved how the AG ended his comments, to acknowledge that all this is about human beings. We ask the men and women who wear the uniform to perform tasks that require them to put their lives on the line every day. And where the men and women of law, and too many times men and women in uniform have lost their lives. We experienced that in our community just a couple of weeks ago in Davis, in neighboring Davis. 22-year-old young woman. And so we have the deepest sorrow, and I am sorry as the city's mayor when any officer is hurt or their life is affected in any way. And at the same time, I am sorry for the families of young men and young women, no matter the circumstances, who lose their lives in officer-involved shootings. We need to say that. It's the worst kind of a tragedy, and we have a lot of self-examination and exploration around the issues still to come from the Attorney General's review, including the issue of implied bias. And so this is so important. It is life and death. And you've rendered us a great service, Mr. Attorney General. And Mr. Police Chief, you've shown tremendous leadership by leaning in. Thank you very much.
Pastor Anthony Sadler, Shiloh Baptist Church.
Thank you, Attorney General Becerra, to Mayor Steinberg, to our Chief Daniel Hahn, to the partners on the stage with us, and to the community at large. I always like to start conversations like this acknowledging the sanctity of life. And no one on this stage is under the illusion that anything that has been said or even done today will take away and eliminate the pain and the loss for the Clark family. But with that, and out of such tragedy, there are lessons to be learned where we can continue to grow as a community and as a city and do better. I have not had a chance to review the report. I'm receiving it just as you are. But as one community voice amongst many, we are excited about the opportunity that it presents. For Chief Hahn to have opened up the department to this review by the AG office and to be transparent as he has been, we believe that this document is not to fix all, but it is one step in the resolution of a complicated issue of the use of force with members of the community that our department is sworn to serve. With that, I believe the direction is right. When I hear the AG speaking of emphasis such as communication and cooperation, that excites me, that encourages me. That's a direction and an approach that we want our officers to take with the community, and I believe we want the community, it's the same direction the community wants to be seen from the officers. We have to get rid of the them and us mentality and start thinking holistically that we are one city, we are one community, together we build. That's going to be an emphasis that you're going to hear in the coming days, weeks, and even months ahead. Together we build, because certainly it is together that we're going to build the type of relationship, law enforcement with the Sacramento community, that the community would like to see and that keeps our officers safe at the same time. And if this one step and this one review puts us a little closer to assuring that no one loses their life tragically to gun violence, then it would have all been worth it. I can't say enough about the integrity of Chief Hahn and his willingness to open up the department in the way that he has. I have been one that have taken internal reviews, and they keep you up at night, and they cause you moments of pause. But even in that uncomfortable inspection, if it leads to change that is worth our Sacramento community embracing, then it's all worth it, because together we build. So my last portion would be to the community at large. Play a part. It's easy to Monday night quarterback. It's easy to sit back and watch the news clips from the media and to come up with your own conclusions and keep your own biases. We're living in a nation that is continually divided by leaders and segments of our communities. I would like Sacramento to be different. I know you would like Sacramento to be different. We are a community like no other, not only in our ethnic diversity, but I believe also in our heart for the city. And I believe that opportunities like this, however tragic they may be, present an opportunity for growth, for Sacramento to come together and maybe even show the rest of the nation what a city working together can look like. So we're under no illusion that this is the fix-all, but I think we need to celebrate the steps that we take, and this is one worth celebrating. And I would encourage the community, get involved at whatever level you choose to get involved, whatever your strengths are, get involved and make Sacramento the city we all hope it'll be. Thank you.
Pastor Sadler, thank you very much for those words. Just want to stress one thing. It's a pretty thorough report, but it's not very thick. It's readable. Maybe it won't be kind of reading you do in bed all the time, but I hope people will take a look. It's a testament and it's a roadmap. And Sacramento could be in the lead as we go down that path. And so I hope the work that's been done by so many people will be acknowledged by having folks read this. And then we can judge whether or not the Sacramento Police Department and our community is making progress in moving forward. You got to start on that road to go from difficult times to a point of respect, and ultimately, we hope, a point of trust. And it's a pretty good roadmap on how to get to that road all the way to get to confidence and trust. We'll take any questions you might have.